Hey, welcome back to our podcast, Inclusive Leadership. It's not black or white. I'm Anna Poole, executive coach, here with my colleague, psychotherapist and teacher, Bede Draper, to try and figure out what is going on. I mean, have you guys noticed that it seems like the more we talk about the need for inclusivity, the more polarized, angry, and divided we become? And before you cancel me for saying that, just listen for a second. I'm deeply troubled and concerned about the racism in my country of origin, the US. 400 years of systemic oppression of Black and brown people is horrific. And then there's homophobia and sexism, to name a few other issues we have yet to come to terms with. But shouldn't our attempts to create inclusivity be inclusive? If they end up propagating more hate and divisiveness, I think that's a problem. In our last podcast, we talked about how we, all of us humans, tend to objectify people who are different than us. And this allows us to treat them poorly. Bede asked the question, am I willing to look at how I treat others, especially when they're different than me or have different beliefs than I do? He ended with a statement, we have to solve this global problem by addressing how it shows up in me. So Bede, what do you mean, solve the problem as it shows up in me? I'm one of the good guys, right?
Yes, well, I'm sure we all are. But what we've got to look, the harsh reality is that we have to be able to look honestly and examine how we relate to other people. Now, this requires the ability to be kind of more objective in the sense of just looking at ourselves and being truthful. Because you see, what's important is to be able to, but we have to be able to look at ourselves under a certain light in order to be able to have clarity on what we're looking at. And so there's two principles here that we can use that shed a tremendous light and that we can measure our behavior in relation to other people. And the first one is that there's a story, a Buddhist story about a baby near a well is about to fall into the well. And this hardened criminal grabs it and stops it doing it. Because you see, in human beings, because there is a possibility of being moved by goodwill. So, and when we're moved by goodwill, what happens is that we act with acceptance, and we actually will the good of other people. And so there's a feel, we feel kind of, we have a sort of an acceptance of other people with all of their fallibility, with their their differences from us. But this is what actually changes us. Now, the thing is, have you ever noticed, Anna, have you ever in your life fallen away from goodwill and become full of ill will?
Oh, you got me. Yeah. A few times.
Yeah, I knew you were a bit of a sinner. The thing is that every human being you know not only have the capacity to be moved by goodwill, but they've got a capacity to be moved by ill will or different forms of antagonism, hatred, anger, or whatever. And when they're moved by ill will, they act badly. They see other people in a distorted way, and they act in harmful ways. So when I am imbued with goodwill, what happens is I am moved to act in the right way. But I can use this as a principle. I can look at my conduct or the state that I'm actually in. I can examine it and can see whether or not I'm actually being moved by goodwill. And are my actions expressive of goodwill? Because the other problem is when we're expressing ill will, we can feel so incredibly right about it, even though that it's harmful. So that's the first one. So do you know anybody who does not express sometimes or dramatize ill will, whether they be black, white, no matter what gender they are, no matter what race or culture? Everybody, have you ever met anyone who is free of that?
Well, you know, as you asked that question, Bede, and it's a really good question. I don't think I have. I think this is really essentially a human problem. I don't think it's limited to any group.
Exactly right. It's actually, in an old-fashioned language, the problem in the heart of man. We wouldn't say that now, but in the heart of the human being. So we have this problem of being moved by ill will, and we have the solution, which is being moved by goodwill, or at least a willingness to relate in the light of goodwill. Now, secondly, we then have this other principle that we can which we can use as a light to examine our behavior. Okay, and this is concern or caring. Now, when we are moved by concern, we take care of, we look after. Okay, you can imagine that with our children or maybe our spouse. But when we're talking about inclusive leadership, this caring must embrace everybody without exception. And so the problem is that, again, when I'm imbued with caring, when caring is active in me, when concern is active in me, I will act rightly. But have you ever noticed when you fall away from that, the first thing that becomes evident, in actual fact, it's not evident, it's actually invisible, we become indifferent. In other words,
bingo.
Yeah.
I see that in myself and others, yep.
Right, so it's not that I don't realize what I'm not doing, because a non-action is an action. So if I am not actively caring or acting in a concernful way for other human beings, first of all, I hardly notice that, but under the light of this understanding of what concern is, I can begin to see that that to the degree I run away from concern, I become indifferent and moving towards ruthlessness.
Bede, I just want to comment on what you're saying because it's so powerful. When I'm coaching executives, this is what I see as the biggest problem. It's not as often that people are acting inappropriately or aggressively, although that does happen, but more it's this profound indifference to the well-being of people who are different, who are not in their circle or in their clan, who look like them or talk like them. So this is really connecting for me. Say more.
Yeah, and well, the thing is that with indifference, you see, with indifference, I can feel right, and I can be blind to the fact that my non-action, my non-relating in an inclusive manner is an action. It is an action. It doesn't feel that way, but it's neglectful. And because it's neglectful, it harms. It's a very harmful action. So it's not just simply, oh, I'm indifferent. No, it's not a feeling. It is actually, indifference is a way of relating to other human beings. And the insidiousness of it is that it's blind. So I can remain virtuous. I don't act. I'm not doing anything wrong. But what I don't see is what I am not doing. And so here we have these two lights, goodwill and concern. Because in order for us to see our life in a clear and undistorted way, there's no such thing as a context-free perception. So in the context of goodwill and concern, a whole range of cognition opens up for me, where I can examine how this problem of the world, this falling away from goodwill, this falling away from concern, exists in me as well as outside. And this way, I as an individual can take responsibility for the problems of the world.
Wow, that is crystal clear, Bede. I'm just noticing for myself that it's so much easier to look outside and see what they're not doing, right? And it's much more difficult to examine my own conduct and see where I'm falling away from goodwill and concern and to correct that, if you will.
Well, one of the major problems is we don't like to see that we like to see ourselves sometimes a little bit different from other people. But the people we're facing they have the same problem that we have, and they also have the same solution that we have. And so this way, by understanding this, we feel a greater solidarity and inclusiveness of others, Whereas if I feel I'm outstanding and rather virtuous and free of any of these sort of things, which is completely delusional, then what happens is I won't see my conduct. I won't feel the goodwill won't urge me to correct my conduct.
This is good. I mean, maybe this is a good stopping point, Bede, because I think we could pick this up and talk a little bit more about, so what do we do about that, right?
Right.
How do we demonstrate more inclusive leadership? Because I think that's where we're headed with this, right?
Well, that's exactly where we're headed with, is that we're putting the responsibilities clearly on ourselves as a human being in relation to other human beings. And we also know that we become a focal point of change or transformation when we relate from goodwill and from concern.
And changing ourselves is ultimately how we change this global problem in the world.
That's exactly right. And then we don't get into virtue signaling or what you were talking about before, looking at the faults of other people. Mm-hmm. We look at the faults as it exists in us.
Wow. I love that. I look forward to picking it up and taking it further. Thank you, Bede.
Okay, bye, Anna.